All right, today's Tuesday tidbit is what are the biggest challenges associated with getting pre-approved? So I call it the limiting reagent. And if you recall back to like grade school chemistry, which of us does not remember that, right? So if you remember back to like grade school chemistry, you can run a chemical equation so many times until you run out of something, and that is the limiting reagent. I like to use that analogy when it comes to getting pre-approved because every single household, every single individual has some limiting reagent when it comes to getting pre-approved. For some people, it's their credit score. For some people, it's their debt to income ratio. It might be the amount of money they have set aside for a down payment. So when we get you pre-approved, our goal is really to figure out what is that limiting reagent. And for some people, it's simply going to be their comfort level. Maybe they have perfect credit, plenty of money for a down payment, and their debt to income ratio is really low. Their limiting reagent is going to be their comfort level before they hit anything else. So that's really the goal of getting pre-approved, is to figure out exactly what is that limiting reagent for their individual situation. So for most people, anecdotally, for most people, if there's a limiting reagent, it's going to be typically three things. The first one might be a credit score. So FHA, VA, USDA, those loans will go down to a 620 credit score typically. Conventional financing is a lot more rigid. They want to see a 680 credit score. So to an extent, credit scores are kind of pass fail. You either meet the requirement or you don't meet the requirement. Now, the good news is once we get you pre-approved, we actually have the ability to tap into your credit report and look at all these different scenarios where, hey, what if this account was paid down, or what if this was removed as a late payment? What kind of impact would it have on the credit score? So once we do pull credit, we do have access to a whole bunch of tools. We can start to, kind of chart a path forward. The second biggest limiting reagent, I would say, is going to be the down payment. Folks have it in their head that 20% down is the minimum down payment. Definitely not the case. As a first-time home buyer, you can put as little as 3% down. As a repeat buyer buying a primary residence, you can put as little as 5% down. A lot of folks are simply not in a situation to have that money set aside, in which case we immediately pivot to looking at down payment assistance programs like Colorado Housing Finance Authority, known as CHFA. And then the third biggest hurdle to getting pre-approved for most people is the type of income. It may very well be that they're earning plenty of income, but that it's not showing up the right way. And that can be kind of a confusing statement that I just said there. But what I mean by that is, for instance, you might be newly self-employed. You might be now an independent contractor. You were a W-2 employee. Now you're an independent contractor. You determined you can make more money that way. That's all fine and dandy. However, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac guidelines, the government's guidelines behind mortgages state, if you're self-employed, we need to see no less than a 12-month history of being self-employed before we can use that income. Or we might have, they receive a lot of cash tips, but they don't necessarily show up on their tax returns. Well, in that situation, we can't use that money as a source of income either. There's ways to fix it. You can go back to being, maybe going back and amending your tax returns, or in the case where you're newly self-employed, maybe you go back to being a W-2 employee until you get your house, buy your house, and then you can always pivot later on after closing to going back to being self-employed. So there's some things we can, tweak and adjust as we go along. But those tend to be the three biggest hurdles for folks to buy a house. Credit score not being in the right territory, income possibly not being acceptable, and then maybe not having enough money for a down payment. Those tend to be the three biggest hurdles to getting pre-approved. Hope that helps. Thanks. Bye.